Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome in to another episode of Under Review. We're coming at you live from the 143.
Get another doozy and bound. We're just kind of doing whatever we want at this point in the year. The NFL season's over, so we're just talking about any and everything. If there's something you would like to hear that maybe we haven't talked about before, let us know.
Well, we're always looking for topics during this time of the year.
Do whatever.
NFL Combine starts Thursday of this week. Hopefully some stories will come out of that. They normally do. They're already starting to kind of trickle out. It hasn't even started yet. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting news next week based on some quotes we hear from GMs, coaches, players this week. NFL's really turned that into kind of a spectacle like they have with pretty much everything else. You want to look at the league that makes money off of literally everything they do. Look at the NFL. They do a great job of it. So hopefully get something out of that. But this week, we're bringing to you something we've talked about before, I think last year, but it's been brought to light yet again, kind of been out in the open with USA-Canada being last week, in which USA took the L in that one. Not much to say about that actual game.
Not a fun watch.
Not a fun watch at the end. Connor McDavid scoring the game-winning goal for Canada. But a great sporting atmosphere and a great event that the NHL put on. You got to give them a lot of credit. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is the difference between the NBA and the NHL. Because in recent, PK Subban, a sports commentator for ESPN for hockey, has come out and taken some shots at the NBA, saying that basically hockey's kind of figured it out and hockey's the better sport for the viewer than the NBA is. And so that's what we're here to talk to you about today and share our thoughts and our factual opinions on it. So to get started, Stat of the Week brought to you by our sponsor, Andrews Logistics. This will be an interesting one for you, Nick. The average viewership in the USA, this is not counting Canada's viewership, of the USA versus Canada game Thursday night, the championship for the Four Nations, was 9.3 million viewers. The average viewership in the US for the NBA All-Star game was a whopping 4.7.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say when this NHL Four Nations deal was happening, nobody gave a rip about literally anything else going on
and
sporting event-wise.
Nobody liked the NBA All-Star format this year, but essentially the NHL Four Nations was the All-Star game for the NHL and for hockey, and that doubled the viewership just in the U.S. I'm not counting Canada's viewership, just in the U.S. of what the All-Star game did for the NBA. So that tells you a lot about the directions both sports are headed right now.
Brought in a lot of new fans, people before who didn't really care about hockey. They were watching it just because, if it's Team USA for anything, you're going to watch because you feel patriotic about your country and everything like that. But, no surprise that it smoked the NBA All-Star game in viewership, as it should have. Almost, or a little over double, actually. So, your player of the week, this is kind of a big story this season in the hockey world that you're talking about history here in the making that we need to be watching out for. Alexander Ovechkin, tonight, Tuesday night, scored goal number 883. So he is 12 goals away from passing Wayne Gretzky all-time for goals in NHL history. And, that's kind of a big deal because Wayne's held that record for what feels like almost forever. And it was one of those things where you don't think anybody was going to get to his level of play. Obviously, he's going to hold the points record probably for the rest of time. But chasing 95 goals to pass Gretzky. Gretzky has 894. And the other thing too is Alexander Ovechkin missed significant time at the beginning of the season, but at this rate, he's going to score he could very well have almost maybe like 50 or something goals just because he's scoring what seems like every single game. He had a hat trick the other night. But that's kind of what's been going on in the hockey world, something to tune into, even if you don't care. But it's just history in the making right before our eyes.
Yeah, something to look for. Big milestone for Ovechkin and history for the NHL. So let's get into it. So basically, PK Subban kind of came out, made a lot of NBA fans mad and a lot of hockey fans happy by saying the NHL, it's not just one of those leagues you can come out and, just go through the motions during any game. Every game has intensity. Every game you have to bring 100% toughness. You can't just go out there and kind of what the NBA does, play zero defense, just kind of throw shots up from, the logo. And, I 100% agree with everything that he said. We've talked about this before, so this is nothing new, which we've been saying this for a long time. The NBA has very rapidly been declining in viewership and just people wanting to watch, including myself as somebody that used to watch the NBA a lot more. But now it's become all about the three ball, and basically nobody plays defense and everybody just chucks up threes. That's essentially all you see in the NBA nowadays. Whereas in hockey, I mean, any given night you're having, fights, physicality, and, it's not over till the buzzer ends the game. So
yeah, because in the NBA, that's the only league we've seen where they have to motivate their players to play, right? Like they're making it to where I believe there's a minimum amount of games you can play.
You have to play, yeah.
And that's unheard of in any other league because these guys are clawing and fighting to play every single night. You have people sitting out in the All-Star game, which is kind of ridiculous, if you ask me, just sitting out for no reason.
Actually, that's the face of the league in LeBron James, who some claim to be the greatest player of all time in NBA history.
Yeah, right.
To sit out during your league's All-Star game when viewership has been tanking on your watch, by the way. When you're the face of the league, you're kind of in charge of some of that stuff. And when you act like people should be watching, LeBron has really hurt the league recently, which I was going to say something about that recently. He posted a picture. The Lakers have 6 games in 8 days, and he said with the caption, "This is insane." LeBron James, the so-called GOAT, the face of the NBA, complaining about having to do his job, which is play basketball.
Yeah, and, key difference back to trying to motivate players to play is you had plenty of guys in the Four Nations tournament playing through injury. I mean, you had the championship game on Thursday, and then 2 days later, Saturday, was when teams started playing NHL games again, going back to their team. And you were seeing a bunch of guys who played in the Four Nations tournament. As soon as they're getting back on their teams, they're being scratched on Saturday because of injury, just because, they wanted to play so bad for their country that they were willing to battle through injuries that they, essentially killed their bodies doing so. And it's just the complete polar opposite mentality of the two sports. And I think that's been really been brought to light as of the last couple years, just because you've had so many NBA players sitting out during regular season games. And then you compare it to the NHL where these guys are, playing through injuries. I mean, you've had plenty of instances where, dude takes a puck off the face at 80 miles an hour or whatever, he's bleeding out, and then they just go get him stitched up in the back or put a fishbowl on his head and then, he's good to go, right out of the gate right after that. Whereas you'd never see something like that in the NBA. That's just completely unheard of.
No, you got these stars like Joel Embiid who have missed more games in their career than they've played, who are on these max contracts. Well, they don't punish the guys for sitting out games when they feel like it. Instead, they reward them with max contracts. So there's really, they have a minimum game on the awards. So like you can't be the MVP or defensive player of the year if you don't play 65 games, stuff like that. But, these guys are they're sitting out during the regular season because essentially the regular season in the NBA doesn't really matter that much because like 10 teams get in with 4 of them being in a play-in. And I think 4 teams are basically left out of each conference. And it's just it's ridiculous. And these games in the NBA lately are decided by halftime. Just whichever team is hotter shooting the three. We rarely have close games anymore in the NBA. And like Nick was saying, you got these NHL players giving their bodies up for the rest of the season for the All-Star game, essentially. And then you've got the face of the NBA deciding because he has a hurt ankle that he's going to sit out during the game, but then the very next day he's going to post a video of him doing some serious squats on the squat machine, showing that, he's fine and playing in a game the next day. Just also something LeBron did is he decided he was going to not play in the NBA game an hour before the game started, thus not allowing them to fill his spot with somebody. So he took somebody's all-star spot who could have been there, who deserved to be there, because he, as usual, has to make it about himself. It's just, it's not the same sport, obviously, but you see one sport that a lot of people really didn't care about until recently kind of start rising as one sport that a lot of people cared about start dropping because, the NHL was genius for making the Four Nations a thing. I think a lot more people kind of realized how cool hockey can be through watching the USA-Canada game, even though it wasn't the result the USA wanted. Everybody was watching. People that didn't know anything about hockey were watching, like Nick said, because it's a chance for the USA to support our country and go out there and hopefully beat Canada. And, it's really cool to see that. The NBA could never, ever put something on really that comes even close to that. And just lately, I'll turn on an NBA game every now and then, and I'm seeing the same things. 20-point lead, players are jogging, they're not playing defense. These guys are going to get easy buckets, just walking past dudes and laying it up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's been the big problem with the NHL is just they're probably the poorest marketed sport, I would say, of the 4 major sports. And this was a huge marketing move by them because it puts so many eyes on the NHL. Obviously, you compare market-wise, NHL, NBA, NBA has them beat, but this was kind of a huge step forward in the marketing section for the NHL, just because that's kind of been the narrative over the last couple of years. Is it's a good sport, but they just have been having issues getting new viewership, right? It's just trying to get it marketed to that new crowd, but that's what this did, right? It's because you've got people watching that, normally don't care, and then I think they know that the NBA is kind of, on the decline a little bit, so maybe getting some people that are curious in this time when you don't have the MLB season yet. The NFL season just ended, so you kind of can maybe win some people over who are in that in-between. But, I personally don't watch a whole lot of NBA. It's just been, I don't know, it's just tough to sit down and watch those games like Joseph was saying. Just
there's no intensity.
There's no defense. It just doesn't look like the guys care. And then you flip it over to an NHL game where, somebody gets thrown into the boards and you've got a scrum going on in the corner or something like that, where it's just 2 complete polar opposite mentalities of, one sport where they're just kind of lollygagging around and then the other where they're literally going out there trying to kill each other every single night.
Something I really noticed in a lot of the big viewership, even except for the NFL and most sports, you don't get a whole lot of viewership during the regular season because the regular seasons are longer. The NFL is, one of the only sports that's kind of figured it out. And the NFL is, leagues above all the other ones just because of their marketing. Like we said, they made the combine a big deal. The combine used to be nothing. So you want to talk about marketing, like the NFL has it figured out, but it really comes down to playoffs for these other leagues. And a lot of times, we saw last year, Panthers went up 3-0 in the Stanley Cup Finals on the Oilers, and Oilers actually, didn't give up. They clawed back, made it to a Game 7, and Panthers ended up winning it. But with the NBA, a lot of times I'll watch the playoffs, and it gets to about a 30-point lead at halftime, and the losing team pretty much sits their starters by the end of the third quarter and basically chalks the game up to a loss to prepare for the next game. I mean, you've got these games that the teams just decide it's over and they'll play the next one. And, like I said before, you got a team that's hot from three and a team that's cold from three. Well, the game's over by halftime just because it's too big of a deficit with the three ball. A lot of people are saying the NBA needs to move the 3-point line back to make it harder to make these threes. I kind of agree. I think we've gotten to that point where the athletes are really good at making threes, and so now you got to make it harder just to make it more competitive. And also what they've done in the NBA with the rules is they've made it to where you really can't touch star players. The refs will give these star players all these all these foul calls to let them shoot free throws, and it's gotten out of hand. So where guys can't even look at LeBron or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander without the ref blowing a whistle and then them going to shoot free throws. So they really haven't been helping themselves, because when you take the intensity out of a sport, the fans don't really care about it as much. And I think that's why we've seen hockey viewership go up recently, because the intensity is there night in and night out. Even if you're playing the worst team in the NHL, they're still bringing it. And one other thing is there's really no garbage time in hockey either. Something I've noticed, like all the players are playing till the very end of the game, which is something that I really like.
Yeah, obviously you're not sitting out when the game is decided, putting that in air quotes, decided, whenever, you're up so big that it's really no way you can lose. But, I mean, that's the other thing too. Joseph kind of mentioned it a little bit with the fouls in the NBA. Is like what really kills me when I'm watching is just, you tap someone on the shoulder, like you barely graze somebody's arm or something like that, and then it's foul, and you're watching free throws. And it feels like a lot of these games when you're watching them, it's just teams going back and forth on the free throw line, and that's awful. And then the end of basketball games too, when it gets to like the last minute or something like that, and it's just all the timeouts, and then all the fouling the other team, hoping they'll miss their free throws, so you can get the ball back. And that's just ridiculous to me. But it's like the thing with the NHL is the pace of play is, times 10 compared to the NBA, because obviously there being no out of bounds, that kind of helps a little bit too. But it's like, it's from the get-go, it is so fast paced, to where there's very little stoppages of play, right? And you just don't see, I'm saying, fouls and penalties the same way between leagues that you do. It's so much worse in the NBA. It's almost, it makes it unbearable to watch.
Yeah, so a problem with the NBA is they've given it's all about the players. The players dictate everything. And, the players at this point care more about social media. They care more about politics and getting their opinions out to everybody than they do about the game that they're playing. It's just pretty obvious that most of the stars in the league don't really care about the direction that their league is headed in, including LeBron. They just kind of care about, just their personal identity and like what they look like to everybody else. And I just think that, what your stars do sets the tone for kind of how the league looks. And I mean, I think it says a lot that you have guys in the Four Nations game, like the Kachuk brothers, like Austin Matthews, like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, the big names in hockey going all out, giving their bodies up just for an all-star game, a game that really doesn't matter in terms of their season. You had all the big names in the NHL out there, given 100% in the All-Star game, and you don't have that in the NBA. You don't even have that during the regular season when the games actually matter. And a lot of times you don't have that in the playoffs anymore. So the NBA has really hurt themselves by letting the players dictate literally everything. And, I think that's where the other leagues have done a good job, is where the players still don't have like all the power. They should have some, but they should not have all the power to decide everything.
Yeah, it's made it very hard to watch for me. And obviously, from what you can tell from what Joseph's been saying, I think he kind of feels the same way. It's just tough, but, it is what it is.
Look, one thing is you're always going to have your hardcore fans. You're always going to have the diehards. They'll always be watching. Baseball, it's tanked throughout the years. It's slowly getting back to where it needs to be, right, with the rule changes, the pitch clock and everything. But, like, we're diehard baseball fans. We'll be watching no matter what. You have that with the NBA. But you're trying to get more casual, average viewers. And I was a casual, average viewer of the NBA, and they lost me. So I think you're losing a lot of your average viewers, and you're going to keep some of the, guys that have, care about the NBA more than anything. But, props to hockey. They definitely rose above the NBA in my book a couple years ago. And
tough to care when you're a Dallas fan too, and you trade away,
best player,
franchise guy, the dude who's supposed to be the next one.
Whooping up on the Mavs right now as we speak.
Yeah, that's okay. So here's like to end our shows an under review. I'm bringing to you a quote from PK Subban, and he, this was just something he said that kind of lit the fire between NHL and NBA. He said, "I want Michael Jordan. I want Kobe. That's what I want in every sport. If you're a different version than that, you don't get my respect."
And the NBA has pretty much lost players with that intensity. You might have 3 or 4, but that's about it. So I think that's the point he was trying to make. Whereas in hockey, you pretty much have that from the best player to the worst player. Guys are always willing to get into it, scrap it up, and give their body for the team. So we need more of that in sports. And, maybe the NBA can bring it back, but probably not. So thank y'all for watching this week, and we'll see you next week with another episode of Under Review.